All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee. I've just got some opening remarks. Just move this over here. The public meeting is being heard by the City Council Planning Advisory Committee, and public notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The non-elected members of the Planning Advisory Committee are Mr. John Baltutis, Mr. David Joyce, Ms. Catherine Brown, and Mr. Paul Jennings. Citizen appointees may ask questions and participate in the discussion in order to assist in making recommendations to City Council, but may not make motions or vote in connection with the public meeting. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Planning Committee or City Council before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council or the local planning appeal tribunal. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City Bylaw before the related bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Comments received at the public meeting, as well as written comments, will be considered by the Engineering and Development Services Department in analysis of the applications that were part of the public meeting tonight. For further information on how to provide comments to the city regarding an application from this public meeting, please email planning@belleville.ca. A recommendation report will be brought forward upon receipt of all agency and public comments in the future. Any persons wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to today's applications are requested to email the city clerk or planning@belleville.ca. And with that, see that everyone's here for attendance. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll go to the public meeting. 3.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, Bylaw 3014, 950 Casey Road, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1135. Owner is Eon Gerald, agent is Keith Watson of Watson Land Surveyors. If we could have the application presented, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark. The subject land is known as 950 Casey Road and is approximately 39.6 hectares in area. It consists of farmland, a barn, and a single detached dwelling. This rezoning is a condition of a consent application which severed the surplus dwelling from the remaining agricultural land. The application proposes to rezone the subject land from a prime agriculture zone and rural zone to a rural residential zone for the severed parcel, which contains the dwelling, and prime agricultural zone with special provisions to prohibit future residential development for the remaining retained parcel. No changes are proposed to the hazard zone, which runs along the south side of the property. And the subject land is designated agricultural and environmental protection in the official plan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I see we have Keith Watson and Jennifer Matthews here to speak on the application as well.
I brought Jennifer in. I don't see a Keith, so I assume it's Jennifer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. It's Jennifer from Watson Land Surveyors. I'm just here to answer any questions to support the application. I think Desta did a fine job explaining what we're doing for the surplus farm dwelling rezoning, but if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much. And so I need a motion from council member to refer this to Plan Advisory. Councillor Alsop, seconded by Councillor Feeney, and all in favor? That's carried. Moving on to 3.2, notice of complete applications and introductory public meeting for proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, Bylaw 10-245, 187 Stanley Street, City of Belleville, file numbers B-50-3-36 and B-77-1137. Owner is Tim Hornweg of Navan Corporation, and agent is Catherine Tran of RFA Planning Consultants. And if we could have the application presented, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a combined application for both a official planned amendment and a rezoning. The subject land is a vacant lot with approximately 21.1 meters of frontage along Stanley Street and a lot area of 1,140 square meters. The official plan amendment requests relief from the sensitive land use policy contained in the official plan. This policy prohibits residential land uses within, or new residential land uses within 300 meters of the Canadian National Belleville Rail Yard, so the CN Rail Yard. The subject property is approximately 96 meters from the CN Rail Yard. The zoning bylaw amendment requests to rezone the subject property from a residential second density zone to a residential sixth density zone with a special provision to recognize the existing lot frontage for the property. The applications combined together would facilitate the development of a 2-story, 6-unit apartment building on the subject land. The proposed development would be considered medium density with respect to the policies of the official plan. And staff have received correspondence so far from CN Rail and as well as the owner of an abutting manufacturing facility with comments and concerns that would be addressed in a future recommendation report. And finally, the official plan designation of the subject land is residential. And that's it for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we have Catherine Tran to make a formal presentation, and I see Spencer Hutchison's also available. Ms. Tran, you're in the meeting.
Hi, yes. Oh yeah, here's pulling up the presentation.
Yeah, so you have the floor.
Okay, just to repeat what Dessa just said, so this is for a official plan amendment and rezoning for 187 Stanley Street. Next. Oh, I think you need to go back one slide. So the subject property is 1,140 meters squared, and it is located within the Belleville Urban Serviced Area. There is a 21.1 meter frontage on the east side of Stanley Street. Surrounding the subject property, to the south, there are low-density residential uses and open space. To the north are more low-density residential and the CN rail corridor. To the west are restricted industrial and commercial uses, and to the east are more restricted industrial commercial uses. The site is clear and vacant at the moment. Next. So this application was filed with the city on March 29th, 2021, and in support of the official plan amendment and rezoning application, a planning justification report, functional servicing brief, and noise feasibility report were submitted as well. Next. So it is to note that there is no site plan approval along with this application, but the proposed development is for a 2-story plus basement apartment building. So total there will be 6 units and approximately 880 square foot per unit. On the main floor and second floor, there will be an outdoor amenity area of a balcony. The density of the apartment building is approximately 53 units per net hectare, which is on the higher end of medium density. To access the property, it will be accessed from Stanley Street. On the north and south lot line, there will be landscaping proposed of 6 feet high shrubs to provide buffering between adjacent dwellings. And to the west of the building, there will be a small depression pond to act as a storm water management feature. The development is proposed to be an affordable rental housing project with units anticipated to be rented out at $1,100 to $1,500 per month based on a 1 to 2 bedroom unit. Next. So the functional servicing report was completed by Three Hill Engineering to identify if there is capacity to service the proposed development. For sanitary wastewater, there will need to be a 125 millimeter PVC sanitary lateral that will be connected from the existing manhole to the proposed development. This will provide gravity flow to be provided to service the main and second floor, and the basement will be serviced through a pump chamber that will allow for gravity drainage within the city's right of way. The report also identified that there is sufficient water capacity to service the proposed development, where a 31 millimeter service lateral will be proposed to connect from existing water main to the proposed apartment building. There are no stormwater sewers on Stanley Street. Currently, adjacent properties drains towards Stanley Street with minimal runoff discharge onto the site. So a depression pond is proposed on the front in the front yard to serve as stormwater retention. Next. In the noise feasibility report, it provided recommendations for transportation noises and stationary noises. So for transportation noises, it was recommended that the outdoor amenity areas, which are the balconies, should be less than 4 meters in depth. Central air conditioning should be provided to all units. Windows, walls, and doors are to be constructed with Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks guidelines and the Ontario Building Code. The exterior walls will be constructed in brick with glazed exterior doors and windows, and warning clauses will be written in tenancy and purchase agreements to inform future owners and tenants of the railway presence and nearby commercial and industrial uses. For stationary noises, the design of the apartment shall have no bedroom windows on the north and east facades, but if bedroom windows are required on the north and east facades, glass acoustic screens are required to shield the windows. And lastly, warning clauses are required by the CN rail to identify shunting and switching noises from the railways. It is to note that in the agenda for this meeting, there were a number of CN comments that came back, and I do believe that the noise feasibility report does address all the comments that were in the CN correspondence. Next. So under the official plan, the land is designated residential. Next. And we are proposing an official plan amendment to seek relief of section 7.7M, which states new residential and other sensitive land uses are prohibited within 300 meters of the CN Belleville rail yard. So we are seeking relief of this policy to permit the proposed development, which is located approximately 96 meters away from the CN rail yard. So per my previous slide, the official plan designation of the property is residential, and it is zoned residential as well. So arguably, this is not a new residential use, as the current designation and zone do permit residential uses. To the north of the property, there are existing residential uses already, which are in even closer proximity to the CN rail. Lastly, potential rail noise would be concealed and absorbed by existing industrial buildings outlined in yellow, and then residential properties to the north outlined in the green. And lastly, a safety berm that is located on the north side of Station Street before potential rail noise would be reaching the subject property. It is also to note that we have noted that there are concerns from the adjacent industrial property to the east, and we will be arranging a meeting with them to discuss their concerns. Next. Lastly, we are seeking a rezoning for the property from residential second density zone to the residential sixth density zone with site-specific provisions. And the site-specific provision is to reduce the minimum lot frontage from 24 meters to 21.1 meters. And that is the existing frontage of the property. Other than that, all other criteria are met. And that is all for me. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. If I can get full screen back. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Baltutis.
Thank you. Through your presentation, there was a statement of owner/tenant notification regarding noise, et cetera, from CN. Is this owner/tenant? Does that mean it could be they're considering condos?
So the project itself will be affordable rental housing, but in the future, if the property is to be sold to a new owner that may may continue to do rental housing as well, they need to be notified of the conditions.
Okay, thank you. One other question, if I may. On one of your slides there, you showed up the property in question in the center and then a blue circle going all the way around. I'm assuming that's indicating the 300 meters, if I'm correct on that, but are you not 300 supposed to be, would the railway yards not be the center and then the 300 meters go around that?
Yes, but it is like kind of reciprocal. If you show the circle from the 300 meters from the property, it does indicate that the rail yard is within the 300 meters. So it is it is my understanding that you are still within less than 300 meters because you are still within that circle. If that makes sense.
To me, it just looks like the railway line yards are quite at the top or the north end of that circle. And if you follow that blue line all the way around, it looks like there's a lot of residents within that 300 meter of the property in like on Stanley Street, but they're well beyond, I would expect, the 300 meters from the center of the rail yard.
That is correct.
Okay, that just shows a little confusing on my half, but
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, I don't see any. Thank you very much. Next, we have Joshua Anderchuk speaking. Sorry, Mr. Hutchison, do you have anything to add on this one?
No, it's the changing of the guard. My young colleague there, I think, did a first-rate job, and I'm just here to answer any questions that may come up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next is Joshua Anderchuk speaking against the application.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for hearing my concerns. My concern is not necessarily with the property itself. My concern is actually with Stanley Street adjacent to the property. As what was visible in some of the documents previously shown, Stanley Street has a very dangerous jog in it in front of the property. And if the city was ever to try to correct that, this property in question would have to have some of it taken away for use of the street, because on the opposite corner you have a former cemetery. So my question is, has this ever been looked into to improve Stanley Street and possibly take part of this property away? Because if this development goes ahead, there would be no way to move the street closer to the building proposed. It would make it too close.
Okay, are you looking, do you want an answer for that right now?
Not necessarily right now. I just want to bring it to attention because the street itself is rather poor. There's no sidewalks. It's narrow. It is traversed by trucks. So if it ever was deemed to be improved, this would severely limit how much of an improvement it could receive.
Okay, staff will note that. Any other comments whatsoever?
None from me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No, I don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Anderchuk. So that is it for speakers. So if I could get a motion to refer this to the Planning Advisory Committee, please. Councillor Sanderson, second by Councillor Alsop. All in favor? That's carried. I need a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting. Councillor Kelly, second by Councillor Alsop. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So moving on to Planning Advisory Committee. I see everyone's in attendance. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Don't see any. Confirmation of the minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held April 6, 2021. Mr. Beltuda, second by Mr. Joyce. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. No deputations, no correspondence. Moving on from referrals from the public meeting. 6.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, 950 Casey Road, City of Belleville. File numbers B-77-1135. Owner is Yon Gerald. Agent is Keith Watson, Watson Land Surveyors. And the resolution reads that report number PP-2021-2022, dated May 3rd, 2021, regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended 950 Casey Road, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and the staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Get somebody to move that, please. Ms. Brown, second by Councillor Alsop. Any questions or comments on that one? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. 6.2, notice of complete applications, an introductory public meeting for proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 10-245 at 187 Stanley Street, City of Belleville, file numbers B-50-3-36 and B-77-1137. Owner is Tim Horrig of Navan Corporation, agent is Catherine Tran, RFA planning consultant. The resolution reads that report number PP-2021-23 dated May 3rd, 2021 regarding notice of complete applications, an introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to official plan and zoning bylaw 10-245 is amended, 187 Stanley Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and the staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Get somebody to move that, please. Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Any questions or comments on this one? Mr. Baltutis.
Very quick question. Thank you. Is this 300 meters, is that a CN requirement or is that part of our official plan?
Ms. McAdam.
So this requirement is in our official plan. It was added to our official plan, I believe, in the past based on an appeal from CN to incorporate certain provisions. So these provisions are in our official plan at the request of CN. Based on some comments, or based on the comments received so far from CN, it does seem that perhaps these provisions could be revisited with consultation with CN, but for right now, we're just looking at this specific property.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Alsop.
Thank you, Chair. So just so I understand correctly, the properties that were north of the subject land that we're discussing today, those are residential properties that are located closer to the rail line. So those would have been built prior to this 300-meter setback coming into effect. Is that correct?
That's correct. Although I don't have the dates of the development of the properties in front of me, those properties, there are existing residential properties to the north.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That motion's carried. Thank you. So moving on to reports. 7.1 recommendation report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, 99 Millennium Parkway, part of lots 29 and 30, plan 22, part 6, 99 Millennium Parkway, part of lots 29 and 30, plan 22, part 6, plan 21R2584, City of Belleville, file numbers B-77-1105. Owner applicant is 273-7778 Ontario Limited, Sunny Puna, and agent is N Architecture Incorporated. The resolution reads that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council: that zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land described as 99 Millennium Parkway, part of lots 29 and 30, plan 22, part 6, plan 21R2584, City of Belleville, from SI2H Service Industrial Zone to SIXX Service Industrial Zone with special provisions for relief to the minimum front yard setback, setback to center line of Collector Road, parking space aisle width, minimum parking space width, and an increased minimum yard setback and minimum landscape buffer to facilitate the development of a hotel. Moved by Councillor Alsop, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Hold on a second. Hold on. I need to see hands. All in favor? Okay, motion's defeated. So just for clarification then, we just, Mr. Clerk, just what are we passing on to City Council here, that this is defeated, or do we need to recommend that it be defeated or be?
Well, there has to be a recommendation, so
That it not be approved?
yeah, Steve, we had this before. There needs to be a recommendation to council for consideration.
Yeah, 'cause right now it'd be considered a non-decision. So yeah, if we can, well, they can. I guess council can either consider the recommendation as put forward, or if you want to put forward your own recommendation, that it be defeated, or that it not be approved.
But I think, if I can, I think the last time we had one that was not support, the staff recommendation wasn't supported. If the committee is considering a recommendation that the application not be supported, there has to be a reason attached so that council can consider that, and then the applicant can take whatever options that are available to them, and that there's justification.
Go ahead, Director Ashton.
So so their application as it currently stands now is for 4 stories. So staff recommendation is for a 3-story hotel, or sorry, a hotel that doesn't exceed 11 meters. So if you're recommending the refusal of their application, you're refusing the application at 4 stories.
Okay.
So, but if you don't agree with the 3 stories, as the clerk has said, you could sort of either have recommended, you do not agree with the staff recommendation of 3 stories, or you do not agree with the use within the service industrial area, those sorts of things.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So Councillor Sanderson, you've heard the direction from staff. Do you want to put something on the floor?
Yeah, well, I guess through the chair, it sounded like we needed a motion, but before we touch on that, just the report itself, the recommendation that's attached to the report is conflicted. And the reason I say that is that so first, I think staff did a very thorough job in terms of the analysis, going back some 30 years and taking a look at the township of Canifton secondary plan, and then the fact that it was zoned service industrial. But it also says in the executive summary that the height of the 4-story building does not conform with the official plan. So on that basis alone, staff should not have, in my mind, made a recommendation that was positive associated to this application. However, having said that, when you read the recommendation, it's, as I said, conflicted. It says it supports and recommends approval with the exception of the fact that it's a 4-story hotel. So, it's like you can't be both, right? You either support it or you don't support it. It's a 4-story hotel, and I think staff are saying that they don't support that. So if that's the case, I certainly agree with that. And I'm not sure what the best way to handle it is. I did pick up on the earlier discussion, and I guess I would cede to the chair in terms of how best to deal with it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let Director Ashton and any other staff just make comment on Councillor Sanderson, your comments there, just so we can narrow this focus in a little bit. So staff, do you want to comment on the recommendation?
Sure, I can definitely do that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair to Councillor Sanderson. In terms of the recommendation, we did support the hotel use. It was the height that they proposed that we did not support and was not in conformity with the official plan. So the 3-story height of the hotel, we were supportive of a 3-story hotel. It's not a 4-story hotel as they proposed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yep.
I'll just clarify again that the staff recommendation does not support the proposed 4-story building height. The staff recommendation is to recommend a 3-story hotel with an increased rear yard setback of 50 meters and an increased landscape strip of 9.8 meters. So as Tom mentioned, we're supporting the hotel use. However, we did not recommend the increase in the maximum building height of the existing service industrial zone. And we've also recommended increased performance standards to ensure that the rear yard setback of the hotel is well away from the properties to the north along Cloverleaf Drive. And we've also recommended an increased landscape strip between the hotel property and the residences to the north.
Okay, so if I could, I see a bunch of hands flying up. I understand what Councillor Sanderson's getting at is that you have an applicant who's asked for a list of criteria of what they want. And what staff are saying is that we're not going to give you this, we're going to give you a little bit less. Is that fair to say? So has the applicant, I guess the question is the applicants, have they reviewed this and do they agree with your recommendation of the 3 stories? If I could get that answer.
To you, Mr. Chair, we have had discussions with them about this. They are obviously in favor of the 4 stories in their initial proposal. However, based on our review of the official plan and the former documents and the zoning bylaw itself, we could not support that. So this was our recommendation for approval for the use.
Okay, so all right. So before I move on, I'm just going to go back to Councillor Sanderson since he's raised the issue originally. Councillor Sanderson, do you have anything you want to add to that? So it sounds as though staff then have modified their recommendation to fit with the setbacks that are required and not go beyond the height restriction that is in place there currently for all of the developments. And that's what they're recommending that we approve. And then I guess it's up to the applicant whether they decide to accept it and go from there.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So yeah, I still think that recommendation is ambiguous. They didn't ask for a 3-story hotel. They asked for a 4-story hotel, and we should only direct our comments against that. The fact that there's been subsequent discussion to try and negotiate a better fit, if you will, I mean, that's all good. But even if it were to come in as a 3-story hotel and it was to be at 11 meters, that would still be 2 meters higher than any existing building in there. So even at 3 stories, it wouldn't conform. It would be 6.5 feet higher. It would comply, if you will, with the zoning bylaw, but it wouldn't conform to the existing buildings that are throughout the neighborhood. So I'm not convinced that the committee would necessarily approve it if it were 3 stories. And because it's only a 4-story application, I think we should deal with it in that fashion and respond to the 4 stories. But the way the recommendation is worded, it's certainly confusing.
Okay, so before I open up any further, because I'm just procedurally want to get a motion on the floor so we can then debate something. So Councillor Sanderson, I referred to you, so I don't know if you want to make a motion, and we'll start with something along the lines of not approving the application for a hotel. I'm just throwing it out that way, and if you want to, however you want to steer it, and then I'll turn to staff for wording, and then we'll go from there, and then I'll open it up for all kinds of debate. But I just want to make sure procedurally we're debating something here.
Yeah, thank you. So the motion would be to reject the application, if that's the right word, in as due to the fact that it doesn't conform with the official plan, i.e. the height.
Okay, so the Planning Advisory Committee recommends that council not approve the application. And then what was the second part? Doesn't comply with the official plan.
Does not comply with the official plan with respect to the height of the building.
And then make reference to the fact that they have requested a 4-story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if staff could help me with the wording to flush that out, that'd be great.
So just, the height is set through the zoning bylaw, and the height limit is 11 meters. So they were proposing
14.5.
Yeah. So it's the zoning bylaw that it doesn't comply with right now. So the official plan doesn't necessarily set a height. So staff has, so I think if the resolution was to focus as well on the, as opposed to the height on the use, is probably what LPAT would focus on if you felt that the use was inappropriate.
So use as a hotel.
Yes.
Okay, so council not approve the application. Go with Councillor Sanderson's due to the zoning bylaw regarding the height. Can we make reference to that, Director Ashton?
So the 4-story doesn't comply with the current zoning height.
Okay. Yep.
Staff's recommendation, however, does comply with the height. So it would be more focused on use, whether you felt that the use was appropriate or not appropriate.
Okay. So Councillor Sanderson, I see you, Councillor Alsop. I'm just trying to work out a motion here before we can debate. Get some wording. So Councillor Sanderson, regarding the use, not appropriate for a hotel, and we're going to need some reasoning for it.
Yeah, is that a true statement? That it's not, that the use isn't applicable?
So currently the use is not permitted in the service industrial. What the current zoning doesn't permit a hotel.
Okay, so then let's add that as well then, sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I see the city clerk working away. Can I get a seconder based on that? Ms. Brown. Okay. Councillor Alsop, I saw your hand first.
Thank you. I just want to take the opportunity to clarify my initial position. I had thought that the motion was that we approved the staff recommended 11 meters, not the application as originally set out. So I don't know if I have to rescind my position, but I was under the impression that we were approving the adjusted, amended staff recommendation of 11 meters. So if we are going to do it on the basis of a 14.5 meter 4-story without doing the zoning change, then I would be opposed to that as well.
Okay, so the original resolution was based on the staff recommendation. Okay, all right. I saw some other hands. Mr. Jennings, I saw your hand. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, I had the same confusion. I was voting for the staff recommendation, if that was the correct way to vote, I believe. Then I guess my vote would stand. But it seems to me that if we've rejected the proposal, why do we have to have this next motion? Why don't we just let the developer come back with another proposal and decide then? I'm not sure why we have this second motion before the fact.
If I can, through the chair, clarify procedurally, Director Ashton would confirm, just for the committees, some of the folks that haven't been here and been through this, a denial. I don't know if this group has. Applicants have, I think, 3 opportunities to appeal. They can appeal if the committee and ultimately council approves, denies, or makes no decision. So if this body recommends to council for decisions, does nothing with this appeal or with this application tonight by not approving the staff recommendation, in effect, that is, from LPAT and the applicant's perspective, a non-decision. So as the clock ticks under the Planning Act, the applicant has the ability to appeal a non-decision to LPAT. It doesn't put the city in a good position to defend that action because there is no basis for a non-decision, or there is less basis than if the committee makes a recommendation with a planning basis for that decision, which is why we're seeking a second resolution to ensure that council considers this committee's input with a planning-based decision for that in the event that the applicant decides to appeal this decision to LPAT.
So
Yeah, go ahead, Director Ashton.
So if I may too, and there's also the ability to appeal a decision if you don't agree with the condition. So in essence, this recommendation provides a condition upon the application, and that condition is that instead of the proposed height, the condition is the limit of height of what it actually is. So it's essentially, we're proposing a condition upon the application, which they can appeal as well. So even if this was approved, for example, they could still appeal the decision of ultimately council because we've made a condition that they're not allowed the additional height that they were requesting.
Yeah, Mr. Jennings.
Yes, thank you through the chair. So the first vote, we voted against the 11-meter larger setback recommendation. And now we have to put together a motion to further deny a hotel, no matter what height it is. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the first resolution was staff's recommendation for a hotel with increased setbacks and a height limit not to exceed 11 meters. And that's the recommendation that failed. So as the city clerk points out, this applicant is expecting a decision of council of the city. And so the resolution that's on the floor being debated now, that the application be denied based on the zoning use of a hotel being inappropriate for that piece of property. And that's the motion on the floor right now.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, so that you got to the essence of what I was going to ask, was that we turned down the 3-story concept and we're now denying it for the hotel provision. Question, have the owners, will they accept a 3-story? I know that's kind of a forecast here, but the idea is, like, is this even going to be feasible for them? Like, is this a moot point in terms of 3 versus 4? I agree. I mean, I've had trouble with it from the outset here because I don't think it's the right place for a hotel. 3-story possibly, but I still think it's the wrong place. So I'm just curious whether the owners, have they provided any input beyond this? Like, they've been back, what, 3-4 times now? So this is not new for them. So I'm just curious where they stand.
Yeah, Mr. Deming.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We've had the discussions with their agent, who's indicated obviously the willingness to work with us. He's already kind of spurred off some creative ideas on how to make it work for them. Ultimately, that decision would be the owner of the property to move forward with it, and we haven't had that consultation with them.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Joyce.
So just through the chair, if I could, Thomas, then from LPAT's perspective, is our case strong enough then if they agree to do 3 stories and we're okay with everything else, despite whether we think it's the right location? I'm just a little concerned from an LPAT point of view that the hotel itself being the issue here is solid enough to be successful at LPAT. I know we have to have some reason here, but I'm just wondering if that's a strong enough case from an LPAT perspective from their side if we decline it based on that. Just speculating.
Mr. Deming.
Through the chair, ultimately, what we used to determine the decision was the official plan, and Belleville's official plan in this area does designate it as commercial land use, and within that designation it does permit hotel as a permitted use. What we also used to determine our recommendation was past documents that led to the creation of the service industrial zone, and that's how we found the history behind that service industrial zone, which is how we came to the conclusion to limit the height. Permitting the actual use, that is currently supported by our official plan.
So that would tell us that we've got a little bit of little room to move here on that alone, but I'm not the expert here, but I'm just worried that LPAT's going to have their own opinion if that's their only argument for declining, even though I was prepared to decline and will still decline. But anyways.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baltutis.
I agree with everything that's being said, but also the official plan, like they're asking for so much zoning changes or bylaws to it. Parking lots smaller, closer to the road, you know, it's like we're giving them a lot more than what's under the official plan. So there's, for me, not only that it's a bad location, like we're just kind of giving in to more questions that they're asking or requirements that they want, as opposed to what's in the official plan. Like, so is that not enough to add to the to our refusal as well as the other comments?
So keep in mind that the setbacks are related to the zoning, not the official plan. So when you are referring to the setbacks off the center line and the minimum rear yard setback and the landscape buffer, these are all provisions under the zoning bylaw. So just because you mentioned official plan, so official plan allows it as a permitted use in the commercial, but the zoning. Director Ashton, you had your hand up there.
So in terms of zoning, we are going through a current zoning bylaw, and yes, they asked for some relief for the zoning. Some of it as reduced frontage actually speaks to better urban design, because you typically want the buildings to be located closer to the street as opposed to the rear of the building. In this case, as recommended by Mr. Deming and explained by Ms. McAdam, the additional rear yard setback is to make sure that they don't stretch out the building and then are back sitting upon the residents that initially had the objections. So in terms of zoning from an urban design perspective, I'm of the opinion that what they've requested makes sense in achieving better urban design. The question is really the use is the main issue. And that's the question about whether the use is appropriate or not for this area. I think Mr. Deming explained that the use, which is related to, is permitted in the commercial. But through the research, it was evident that, you know, this was originally a service industrial area, and there was some intention through the zoning to sort of provide some sort of recognition that it was adjacent to. Probably in similar cases, an official plan would be more specific with special policies. So we're piecing the rationale behind it, but there weren't specifically special policies in the official plan, which you might typically find. However, we feel as staff that looking at the overall intention of the service industrial area and how it was implemented, that, you know, there was intention to minimize the impact on neighboring residents, which is, in our perspective for recommendation, is reflected by the overall height.
Mr. Baltutis, do you have anything else? Okay. Any other questions or Mr. Deming?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add on to what Director Ashton said there. The additional provisions for the parking are reflective of our Belleville zoning bylaw, which tends to be our urban area. This Thurlow zoning bylaw was reminiscent of the rural past that it had. So that bringing that in line, that's where those provisions came from. And the reduced front yard setbacks, again, in addition to the urban design guidelines, was to help alleviate the height impact on those residential neighbors by pushing the building closer to the street level. Just a little more extra context for those.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this one? Yeah, Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just so if folks are watching for the first time tonight, we're talking about this hotel, and I mean, initially in the report we got, it was supposed to be 5 stories, then it was 4 stories, and now they're proposed as 3 stories. And I remember quite well in the cold winter night on a Monday, We had lots of deputations from folks in that neck of the woods. And in our report, we had, I think, 6 people spoke against it. And they had circulated a petition. There was 27 names. And their voice was heard loud and clear for me. It just seems to be some disconnect here on where we're going moving forward. So we've gone from 5 to 4 to 3. And will be supporting the neighbors in that neck of the woods. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm just going to add a couple of things. The presenter talked about it was unfortunate that the residents chose to live there. And if you go back in history, those houses were there long before Millennium Parkway was even a concept or a drawing. And, I recall back my first term of council, Millennium Parkway didn't even go all the way out to Highway 62, right where the bend in the road is. There was actually 2 houses that were there that the city had to purchase and have removed in order to extend that road out and then recalibrate cloverleaf. And as staff point out, and I recognize the position staff are in, they're trying to work with the applicant. We're also listening to what the community is saying. I think the biggest statement that was said tonight was a lot of the concept in that area was under a rural design. And now as we continue to urbanize that area, you're getting a little bit of that conflict. And that occurs, in areas where you have well-established neighborhoods and then you have growth and intensification. But at the end of the day, everything that has been approved along Millennium Parkway has all been done within the understanding of trying to not be intrusive on the existing homeowners. And, I know that there's some technical things that planning staff look at, and certainly planning advisory committee has to look at. But I go back to put yourself in someone else's backyard and have that intrusiveness and have that violation of privacy. I guess when you've had a house there for 40 years and yes, development's going to occur. And I've talked with some residents along there, and they accept the fact that the city continues to grow and that land is being purchased and developed. But everything along there has been put in such a way to not be intrusive on the existing neighborhood. And I think that's the thing that we're looking at. So when it comes down to the development, and I even had one resident say, if it was a 1-story motel, I wouldn't care. If the setbacks were there, they can't see over my fence, and I can enjoy the privacy of my pool without strangers looking at me, I'm okay with that. And I think that's reasonable. And I think that we have enough precedent along that road from a planning perspective to show what the city's intent was. We're not trying to limit the commercial uses that are available there or the light industrial. It's just that the community expects that they are going to be placed in such a way and developed in such a way as to not be intrusive on residential homeowners. And I think that's reasonable. So I know we've kind of stick handled through that, and we've got a motion on the floor then to recommend to City Council to deny the application and regarding the hotel use. And so I got a mover and a seconder. If there's no other questions or comments, Mr. Jennings. Mr. Jennings, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I guess then this motion we're voting on is whether we should be allowing a hotel or not. This has nothing to do now with the size or location of the building, correct? We're going to deny any future hotel, motel at that location.
Yes, it's based on the use. That's what staff have said.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? I need to see hands. All in favor of that motion? I've got 3 motions defeated. Okay, so we're back to square one. Again, procedurally, we should be providing a recommendation to City Council so that there is a decision. As the city clerk has articulated to us, failure for this committee to provide a recommendation of which then council can make a final decision puts the appeal clock in motion and does not put the city in a very defendable position in any way, shape, or form. So I'm looking for committee members for some direction. Councillor Feeney.
I think the point that when the decision was made that it could not be used for future use at all, that's why I did not put my hand up. I don't think that we're in a position to do that for futures. I understand the concerns about the height of the building, absolutely. Understand that if we're going to say to council that no way is there ever going to be a hotel there, then that's a decision that we have to make. But I think that we look to staff to give us the best counsel, and I believe that they have done a very good job in that. I would go to my first hands up, which is yes, the use of the area for a 3-story hotel with all of the staff recommendations. I think we should put that forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'm going to ask for some direction here. This is one time I wish I was at City Hall. We could have this procedural discussion off air. So we have a motion. We have 2 motions essentially, and they're both been defeated. If one motion comes back, it will be a reconsideration, or can it come back? It cannot come back at this meeting. Mr. Clerk, I'm looking for some direction here.
Yeah, I mean, at this point right now, the committee is in a position where nothing will go to council on this application. So there is no recommendation. You've defeated a staff recommendation, and then you've defeated a committee drafted resolution. So as it stands, there would be nothing forwarded to council for consideration. The applicant with an agent is probably abundantly clear on the deadlines in the Planning Act for appealing a no decision. So the committee needs to, at some point, make a recommendation to council for consideration, and council can do with it what they will. Both resolutions that have been on the table tonight for consideration, you're correct, Mr. Chair, they would be considered reconsiderations to come forward. You would need, again, at the chair's discretion and the committee's, 2/3 of this body's members to even get the motion back on the floor prior to it being considered.
And can I do that at this meeting?
You can, and then if that motion were to fail, the reconsideration motion, it would be 1 year, calendar year, before it could be reconsidered, which, again, the planning process and the deadlines that are contained within it I would advise would proceed well in advance of the ability of this committee to make a recommendation in advance of that, along that line.
Okay, thank you. So committee members, yeah, you see the bind we're in here. Ms. Brown.
Mr. Chair, I believe there's some confusion over the second motion that we just voted on, and doing things via Zoom is greatly challenging. I think we all respect that. But there was a comment made by a member of PAC just before the vote that indicated that we would never, ever be able to build a hotel or a motel on that. And Councillor Feeney confirmed that. I don't believe that was the actual wording of the motion. And so people may have voted based on a comment as opposed to the actual wording of the motion. So I just want to bring that to your attention.
If I can, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
And Director Ashton or the planning staff may have a different opinion. The reality is the resolution as tabled for consideration by council or by members, the second one, was to recommend to council denial of the application. 2 parts, maybe not first needed, due to the nonconformity with the zoning bylaw related to height requirements from the application for 4 stories, and more importantly, and the use of the property as a hotel being not permitted under the current zoning bylaw. So I think at this point, the committee may be conflicted as to whether that doesn't permit it ever. The reality is, I think the city would be in a tough position at LPAT because you have 3 planning staff members, all able to give expert testimony at that tribunal, who would very likely be called by the applicant on their behalf to testify for them against the decision of council if they deny this application. And this committee is recommending to council to consider not approving an application based on the use of the property not conforming with the bylaw as a hotel. So to approve one in the future after arguing that it doesn't conform and therefore you denied an application is a pretty firm stance.
Yes. Okay. So I need something from the committee in terms of where we go from here. If a motion is going to come back, it requires a 2/3 for reconsideration. And then if that fails, then it doesn't come up for a year. But we can't be sitting here in paralysis. We should be having some recommendation go to council because the appeal clock is running right now. And you know, without us providing a firm decision here, we're not in a very good defendable position in any way, shape, or form for any of the arguments that were put forward tonight. Director Ashton.
So there's always the risk at any point in time that the applicant can appeal. I guess the other decision, but you're risking them, the applicant being able to appeal, is that you could defer it back to staff, but I'm not exactly sure what you would want to defer it back to explore the possibility of if the applicant would be wanting a 1-story or 2-story hotel, but at that point in time, I would assume then they're going to appeal a non-decision, and then the tribunal is going to mostly hear about the 4-story hotel. But that could technically be another option.
Okay. So the deferral can go back. Councillor Feeney.
Can we go back to a rewind about the initial discussions that we started about in the beginning of the conversation?
Well, I was going to say, if we're going to go back to that conversation, then we need to have a reconsideration motion procedurally to put it back on the floor.
May I do that?
Okay.
Okay.
So, and that is the original recommendation is what you're asking for reconsideration?
Yes, for the 3-story and what the staff has recommended.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Feeney for reconsideration. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Alsop. So reconsideration motion, Councillor Feeney, you can speak on that reconsideration procedurally. So if you want to provide your rationale as to why the committee should be reconsidering that motion, the floor is yours.
Well, during the course of this conversation, there has been a bit of confusion in terms of use of that commercially, the heights, the differentiation, and all of that. And so we've kind of gone around the mulberry bush here. And given the fact that our lack of recommendation to council could end up with a year's delay or whatever, and would not benefit anyone. So I'm just asking for reconsideration by the people around the table.
Okay. So there's no debate on a reconsideration. So Mr. Jennings, I can't, unless the only thing I'm going to allow is a clarification. If you have a question on clarification as to what we're doing procedurally, I will take questions. But aside from that, there's no debate on a reconsideration. Mr. Clerk, how many votes do we need? 2/3. What is that?
Need six in favor or opposed, or six in favor to allow the reconsideration.
To allow it to come back on. Okay.
Right.
So, all right. So with that, I'm going to call the question for reconsideration. All in favor? 3, 4. So I got 4. Motion fails. Okay. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you through the chair. So I guess I will try and put the for reconsideration my motion back on the floor. Before we do that, I think it's important to acknowledge that the applicant hasn't applied for a 3-story hotel. That's staff giving us information in terms of what they feel would be acceptable. We're supposed to be dealing, I think, with the applicant in his submission. His submission is for a 4-story hotel. He may or may not have any interest in excuse me, in building a 3 or a 2 or a 1-story hotel. What we're dealing with today is a 4-story hotel. So if I can get a mover, we'll put that back on the floor for reconsideration.
What I'm going to suggest here is, because I've counted the hands back and forth several times, and I'm fearful that if I have another reconsideration on here, the way the vote's going to go, it's going to go the complete opposite, and I'm going to run short again, and we're going to be in a paralysis in a big way because now we've done a reconsideration. Might I suggest that we, from a safety perspective, refer this back to staff? And I suggest, Councillor Sanderson, that perhaps we get clarification from the applicant as to whether or not they're willing to modify their application as it pertains to the height requirements that we're seeking, and allow staff to have that communication with them. And then that way we can get more information back to this committee, clear up the speculation that we're making without knowing for sure what the applicant's doing, before we get ourselves into a very big quagmire here that we're not going to be able to work ourselves out of because of procedure.
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so a motion to refer it back to staff, get clarification from the applicant with respect to the height requirements in order to meet the existing zoning bylaw. Is that fair, Councillor Sanderson? That wording?
Yep, perfect.
Okay. All right. Okay, I need a seconder for that, please. Ms. Brown. Okay, debate on that motion. Anybody have anything to say? Mr. Joyce.
Well, yes, we have lots to say. We're going to take one more stab at this, which is to be what, tape 4 on this, I guess. And the only two things we've been kind of talking about is height and the zoning re-hotel. I guess I'd throw out, is there anything else that we need to be debating of the special provisions that we've talked about? Because if we can solve, let's come back and they say 2 or 3, we have to deal with the hotel zoning. But is there any others at this point within this group that we have concerns with? Because now's the time to get it on the table, because we can't afford to bring it back another time. This is it. So I guess I just put it back to you through the chair. If there's anything to staff that we need to debate that is, challenging or gives us grief here, it should be discussed now, I think.
Okay, well, I think staff have been quite clear in terms of where they view this application. And so it's been committee members that have kind of looked at this in a more restrictive lens, which is fine. So I'll leave it up to committee members if there's anything else they want to identify. So the motion's on the floor to defer this back for staff to have further consultation with the applicant regarding the height requirement. Okay, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, 7.2 recommendation report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, 134 Millennium Parkway, City of Belleville. File number is B-77-1133. Owner is Roger Lipsky. Agent is Joe Chinook. And the resolution reads that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council: that bylaw number 3014 is be amended by amending the Service Industrial SI 8 zone to include further special provisions to include veterinarian clinic with animal boarding services as a permitted use. I need somebody to move that, please. Mr. Joyce, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments on this one? Mr. Joyce?
Yes, I don't have a problem with it. It's just there was one little typo there that you may want to clarify in the report. The very last section talks about proposed day nursery use, and I think we obviously cut and paste from a wrong proposal, so you may want to correct that in the minutes and or the document itself. Otherwise, it's fine.
Thank you for that. And at least we're not talking height on this one.
No, we're not.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Information matters, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment monitoring report, report to May 3rd, 2021. Does anybody have any questions or I'll get a mover and a seconder to receive that first. Mr. Beltuda, seconded by Councillor Alsop. Any questions or comments on that one? Seeing none, then all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. General business and inquiries. Does anybody have anything? No, I don't see any. Okay. Closing remarks. Planning Advisory Committee's applicable decisions will be forwarded to the City Council for consideration, forming part of the agenda for the City Council meeting to be held in the future. With that, I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Feeney, seconded by Councillor Alsop. All in favor?